What's up guys, and welcome to this full review of this, which is the Samsung HU7500 4K Ultra HD television. Now I've had it for just under 2 weeks and I've had plenty of opportunity to test pretty much every aspect of it, so this is my full review to let you know whether it's any good and whether it's worth buying. Before we get started, the thing running in the background is the Heaven benchmark, and this is running off a PC, and this is running in 4K quality. So who is this TV actually aimed at? Well, it's not the budget market, but it is more of a budget 4K television. It's not the lowest price 4K television you can get, but it aims to be sort of an all-rounder because it still has all the features you want without running into silly money. So, what is it like? Well, let's start with the design. It's very, very thin, both from the bezel point of view and actually round the back. So it's not going to take up too much room in your home, and if you want to wall mount it, everything runs flat, it doesn't have anything that sticks out the back, and it is going to look very nice indeed. The design is very nice. You can see that we've got this nice black trim, and then you've got the silver bezels at the back and the silver base as well. So it is a very good looking television, and I don't think you'll have an issue having it in your home. Around the back we've got this sort of matte black finish just on the back. It's fairly plasticky, but of course you're never going to be touching it. It's around the back of the television, so it does do its job. Port wise, we've got 4 HDMI 2.0 ports, and these are toggled on and off using the UHD colour function, but more on that a bit later. And then you've got pretty much everything else that you want around the back as well. Of course, you can find the full technical specifications in the description below. So the TV looks good, and because of its 4 HDMI 2.0 ports, it's pretty future-proof as well. It also supports up to 444 chroma at 60Hz 4K, which means that literally at the moment, everything is pretty future-proof. But if that's not enough, then there is the One Connect box that Samsung do, which enables any future connections that might come out to be connected to your TV even though it doesn't have them, all via this One Connect box. But the thing that we all are wondering is what actually is the television itself like? Well, the menus themselves are a bit hit and miss. It's the same Samsung menu that is carried all the way throughout its range. It's got the Smart TV hub that of course we've seen before, and it's not really changed much in this iteration. But it's fairly easy to use. There are a few features like game mode which are tucked away in silly places. You have to go into general, and then I can't even remember what it is. That's how hidden away it is. It's not in the picture menu, you've got to go somewhere else. But other than that, pretty much everything is in the place you'd expect it to. It's got a quad-core processor, which is meant to mean that everything runs really nice and smooth, and of course it does have to render 4 times the amount of pixels. But that having said, it is a bit more sluggish than I would like. It comes with 2 remotes though. You've got this fancy one, which has all the functions that you will need to actually use the television. And it's also got this sort of Wiimote-esque thing. It's Bluetooth, and so you get a little pointer that you can follow on the screen, and that is an easier way to select stuff. But for everything else, and you pretty much only need this when you first set up the TV, but if you're a bit of a fiddler with a lot of the settings all the time, like I am, then you'll probably be using this remote more because it's actually got all the buttons that you need, like the tools and the info and things like that. So if you want to check what you're watching, like I always do, you just press the info thing, and it's not actually doing it at the moment, there we go, and then it will come up, and of course it will tell you what you're reading. So at the moment we're getting 3840 by 2160 at 60 frames a second. I don't have too many complaints about the menu other than the fact that it is very sluggish, and this isn't so much of an issue because obviously you don't need to go into them that often. But there is another television in my home which is only about £280, it's a 32-inch Samsung, and that is a lot more responsive in the same menus, which is pretty frustrating when you're spending this much money on a television and it's actually less responsive. But it isn't really a major issue for me, it's just sadly a bit of a sour point about the television. But it more than makes up for it in the picture quality. You'd expect it at this price, but literally this is fantastic. We start with the most obvious thing, which is the fact that this uses a VA panel, which means the blacks are going to be very good, and they do deliver. Blacks are incredibly crisp, and personally I haven't often seen blacks this good. Obviously you've got to spend a lot of money to get this sort of dimmer control. If you set the dimmer control to sort of normal or a fairly lowish amount, then you're not going to get any of this haloing where some bits of the screen will be brighter than others. And actually it's a very uniform panel. I haven't really noticed much backlight bleed or banding or anything like that. The actual panel I've got is pretty good. I don't have any complaints there. You can't expect it to be absolutely perfect, but I am pretty happy with how all of that looks. The picture quality is of course upscaled, so if you're watching a 1080p source, which most people will do, then it is going to be upscaled of course because it's got 4 times the amount of pixels, and the engine does do a very good job. If you turn game mode on, then it does take away some of that upscaling, and it is a big difference. It's very obvious, which means that actually the upscaling is doing its job very nicely. So we'll talk about games in a minute. If you put on a Blu-ray, I am astounded with how good it looks, not just obviously on the blacks. The whole picture looks absolutely fabulous. The colours aren't oversaturated like some Samsung TVs are. It doesn't need too much calibrating. It comes up with contrast on 100 when you take it out of the box, which is obviously too much. But if you set the backlight to about 8, 9 or 10, brightness to about 40, and then contrast to 80, the picture is absolutely incredible. And I've been enjoying some Game of Thrones recently on Blu-ray disc, and it looks absolutely fabulous. But of course you'd expect Blu-rays to look good. The television quality is a bit hit and miss. I found that on some programs setting the motion plus to clear results in a juddery image. This is a bit hit and miss, it depends on the program. But setting it to smooth is one of those things where it's too smooth and it's doing all this fake interpolating stuff. That's probably not how you say that word. But unfortunately, some things can suffer a little bit. I find that sport, it's best to leave it on smooth and everything else on clear. But I think that's just its handling of 1080i signals. I can't say I'm that impressed with the image quality, but it is only Freeview HD, so it's not really the end of the world. But if you are watching it as your main source, it is something to consider. But I haven't personally seen the other televisions in this range at its Freeview HD quality playback, so I can't comment on that. But what about the star of the show, 4K playback? Well, there are many words to describe it. I personally choose the word mesmerizing. If you're sat the right distance away or you have a big enough TV, that bit is key, because the further away you sit and the less detail you can see. It's just a limit of the human eye. If you sit far enough away from a standard definition 480p signal, it's going to look as good as it can get. So in order for 4K to look good, you've got to understand you've got to have a really big TV, or you've got to have, you've got to be sitting quite close to it. So if you sit quite close to this 48-inch TV, you can see all the detail and it looks absolutely fabulous. It's definitely the best picture quality I've ever seen. But the further away you sit from it, then the less you're going to notice the detail. So if you're planning to get a 4K TV, make sure you're either sitting quite close to it or you order a big enough size, because it's going to be a lot of money for something that if you can't really see the difference, then that is going to be a real shame. So make sure you do bear that in mind. But if you do sit in the right sort of place and you have a big enough screen, it looks absolutely fabulous. Whether you're watching Netflix, which is of course the main source of 4K, so you've got House of Cards on there, you've got Breaking Bad, and then you've got a few other documentaries. It does depend on your area. Or if you actually use a USB stick or a computer or something like that, and then plug into the TV, then you've got loads of 4K content that way. It's not exactly the same as HD, where it's everywhere, it's quite the opposite. But when you do see it, it is absolutely incredible. Now the last thing to mention on picture quality is the fact that you've got a glossy screen, which means you're going to get loads of reflections. And while it's not too bad, it depends of course on your lighting in your room. It is quite noticeable if you've got it against a window or it's really bright light focusing on it. So again, bear that in mind when you're positioning your TV, but it's not too much of an issue and you can always draw your curtains. And of course if you're watching it later at night, that's not going to be an issue, but definitely something to bear in mind. It's a glossy screen, you're going to get reflections. So that's everything for image quality. It delivers on blacks, it delivers on colours, and it delivers on pretty much everything else. The only slight issue is 1080i handling. So what about gaming though? A lot of people are going to be using TVs like this for gaming. The response time isn't quite as good as it would be from a non-4K TV. If you engage game mode, it does cost your picture quality slightly, as I mentioned earlier, but then the response time becomes pretty much inconceivable. Personally though, depends on the game, I don't do much competitive gaming with a controller, so I'm quite happy just to leave the picture mode just in PC, and then that way it's not quite as responsive as it is in game mode, but the picture quality is even better. So you've got a slight amount of input lag, but nothing that is unplayable. If you're playing on a PlayStation 4, then the image quality is still very good. Obviously it's only 1080p, or obviously less than that if it depends on the game. We're not going to get into that here. But the real star of the show is PC. Now if you have a PC and you have a GTX 980, GTX 970 or a newer card that hasn't been announced at the time of filming this, then you can get the full 444 colour 60Hz Ultra HD, or at least you should be able to. but there's some issue at the moment. Hopefully it'll be patched by firmware, which means that the colours you get, I think it's 422, so you miss some of the actual colours, and it's too much to actually explain. Google it. If you Google 422 versus 444, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it's not really an issue that affects me too much. As you can see now, the colours are still pretty fabulous, and I don't really notice too much of a difference. But if you are going to use it as a dedicated PC monitor, which is a bit big for that, personally in my opinion, then that is something to bear in mind. But the gaming experience is brilliant. If you feed it a 4K signal and you have the power, then nothing comes close to it. There's too much to kind of fit into one short video, so I'll keep it very brief. It looks absolutely fabulous. So if you've got the power, please feed some 4K gaming content into this TV, because it looks brilliant, and that was the reason that I got it, and that is the reason that I'm so happy with it, because the quality is absolutely astounding. And so that actually brings us towards the end of this review. And of course there will be another video to actually determine just 4K TVs in general, whether they're worth buying. But is this worth buying? If you have the money, then well, absolutely. I'm sure it'll get a little bit cheaper towards Christmas. It's already dropped twice, I believe it is, since the original price when it came out. But it is absolutely astounding. It's a great bit of kit. I don't wish that I'd gone larger, because it was considerably more expensive. But if you do have the income, then the larger the better when it comes to 4K. There isn't that much 4K content out there. Pretty much the only 4K content other than the Netflix is the stuff you can make yourself. But of course that will change in the coming months, and it's great that we've got Amazon Prime actually is coming with 4K, so I'll maybe update in the description when that's here and what that's like. But yeah, there's not much 4K content, so actually whether it's worth buying for 4K depends on how much 4K content you personally have. But obviously that will change, and the upscaling with the 1080p Blu-rays is good enough that I can recommend it, even if you don't have any 4K content yourself. So thank you for checking out this review. There's not much to say other than it's absolutely brilliant. Go buy it if you are interested in it. Some of the other televisions in the range aren't quite up to scratch. The Sony, I believe, can't do 444. The LG has a slower response time, so it's not quite good for games. But of course, I've only really had much hands-on time with this particular model of the Samsung HU7500, so do bear that in mind. Obviously go and check out some other reviews before you spend this much money on a television, but it gets my seal of approval. It's brilliant, and I'm so glad I got hold of it. So thank you for checking out this review. If you enjoyed technology reviews, this technology review, then subscribe. If you enjoy PCs, gaming and technology videos in general, then subscribe. Give the video a like if you thought it was good and it answered all your questions. Give it a dislike if there was something you thought was missing. And of course, either way, leave me a comment in the description below to let me know what you thought. It's of course worth noting that I haven't given you loads of hard figures on colour accuracy and things like that, because I don't normally do this sort of review and I don't have the kit, so you can't really hold that against me. Thank you so much for checking out this review though, and I will see you in the next one. Open Netflix.